My name is Maggie Rodriguez, and I did my artist research on Andy Goldsworthy. Andy Goldsworthy is an English artist who has been creating earthworks since 1976. His work is known for being ephemeral. Often the only lasting element of his work are the photographs taken of it. He keeps diaries as he creates artworks, documenting the process of their creation. In addition to the documentation he creates once he finishes a work, he will often revisit works after he has completed them to document their natural decay. In a diary entry regarding the ice arch pictured on the left, he said, "Visible from long distance, attracted someone from long way, good to show it. Went back later to draw it, arrived just in time to see a very old man knock it down with a gun. Sad." Another feature of Goldsworthy's work is the harking back to previous artworks. Domes and voids are two motifs that show up in Goldsworthy's works over the decades. Pictured here is one of Goldsworthy's permanent artworks. He installed these domes at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., as the culmination of a multi-year project with the museum. For the first part of this project, Goldsworthy spent time at an abandoned quarry in Virginia, creating more of his typical ephemeral artworks, such as gathering clay from the quarry and molding it into ridges on the surface of rocks. In a diary entry during this process, he wrote, "The works I have made here have, I feel, understood the changing light that passes through this place. They have succeeded because they have worked with a specific time, place, and material, a meeting of light and form which I have never achieved in similar conditions before. I have been allowed a new way of looking." This deep immersion and communion with nature is an important part of Goldsworthy's creation process, and though the works created in the quarry only live on in photographs and diary entries, they were an important part of the creation of the permanent installation at the museum. Goldsworthy was also commissioned to create these 11 stone arches by Gibbs Farm in New Zealand. They also hark back to one of his ephemeral works, 11 arches made of sand on a beach in Scotland. These arches are made of stone, formed only with gravity holding them together. Though these arches are more permanent, they still face weathering and will one day also collapse. Another feature significant to the creation of his artworks is the material used to create them. For his ephemeral work, he uses materials immediate to the location, but it is also an element he incorporates into his permanent works. The 3 cairns were created by Goldsworthy as a set across the United States. He drew an imaginary line radiating out from the Midwest and built a cairn at 3 points along that line, one on the West Coast, one at the Midwest point, and one on the East Coast. He used Iowan limestone to create all 3 cairns, tying them together in design and orientation as well as material. He was intrigued by the fossilized aquatic creatures in the limestone quarried so far away from the coasts. Something that immediately drew me to Goldsworthy's artwork was how it reminded me of when I was a child and I used to play with rocks and leaves and flower petals. This sort of nature play is universal to children. Goldsworthy said he used to hate it when people referred to his work as childlike. He said, "I used to say, hey, I'm a grown-up and this is grown-up art, but since I have had my own children and seen how intensely a child looks at things, you really can't describe that looking as naive. My work is childlike in the sense that I am never satisfied to look at something and say that it is just a pond or a tree or whatever. I want to touch it, get under the skin of it somehow, try and work out exactly what it is." Another motif that has shown up many times over the decades of Goldsworthy's career are many different kinds of shadows. Whenever it rained, he would lie down on the ground until the rain stopped and he could get up to see and photograph the dry ground where he had been. He also created many frost shadows, waking up early to stand completely still while the sun rose and melted the frost everywhere but within his shadow. Talking about his rain shadows, even in places as public and busy as Times Square, Goldsworthy said, I just concentrate on the rain. I've learned so much about rain, the different kinds of rains, the rhythms of rains. And people will say, oh, why don't you just use a hose pipe? That would be totally pointless. The point is not just to make the shadow, it's to understand the rain that falls and the relationship with rain and the different rhythms of different rainfalls. This is just another way that Goldsworthy immerses himself completely in nature, even becoming temporarily part of the landscape. Goldsworthy said he doesn't make rain shadows as much anymore. He is in his late 60s now, but he still incorporates shadows into his work. About his work, Two Shadows, he said, there are about 2 weeks in autumn and 2 weeks in spring when the sun rises directly through the door of my studio. During lockdown, when so many people spent time staring at walls, I stood standing still for just over an hour as the sun rose behind me and my shadow projected on the wall in front of me. Since then, if the sky is clear and I am at home, I have made shadows on the same wall. On several occasions, the sky clouded over. Even these have been interesting to make, but shadows like the ones that I made on the 2nd of March 2021 and the 15th of October 2023 are what I strive for. They were almost perfect.